A lot of people notice the comic shelf behind me. I chose it because it's a really good backdrop. But some people wanted me to give a little tour of my room. I can't do that yet because I moved into this place about a month ago, a little more than a month ago, and I'm still unpacking. Isn't that always the way? Really, I guess I'm not procrastinating when it comes to unpacking. I've been working. I've been working on videos. And so when it comes down to the choice of, unpacking or building another bookshelf, I got another bookshelf like this I need to build for my other comics. I usually put that off in favor of writing scripts or recording video. So I'm getting to that. And this is actually not anywhere near all the trade paperbacks I have. I have several long boxes full of individual comics. These are just the trades I have. And I may not be a very good comic fan because I prefer collecting trades instead of dealing with individual issues a lot of times. I do have a lot of individual issues, but by and large, I don't keep them around for resale value and sentimentality. I like to read them for the stories. And so when you're interested in the stories, they're nicely collected in the trade paperbacks. Hard to go wrong that way. So I'm probably going to take the camera off the tripod and kind of narrate some of my favorites. I'll try to get it closer for you. Hang on. And really, I only keep comics around that I really like, and you'll have to excuse me if it's dark. Hang on a second. Let's see. The first thing you'll notice is I have a lot of Conan, because I actually got into Conan very late in the game, and I have almost all of the major Conan collections. These are especially good, the Savage Sword of Conan, which are collections of the vintage black and white comics. And I've also got Sin City. But I think by far my biggest collection, my biggest interest is the Hellblazer comics, in which what really frustrates me about these is these trades are not numbered. And Hellblazer goes back a long, long way. And it's really frustrating. I have to go to Wikipedia and find out these are not in order. I have to find out what order they come in, because many of these trades do rely on you knowing what happened previously in the series. Constantine goes through a lot of evolution in that sense, and it's very frustrating when you've really missed something major that happens. And also, Hellblazer tends to be very uneven. Some writers are much, much better than others. I can't think of which ones I really didn't like offhand. I can tell which trades I didn't like. This section is almost entirely devoted to my favorite comic author, Warren Ellis. I will admit, right off the bat, to being a massive Warren Ellis whore. I love basically everything that the guy has written. My favorite probably being Transmetropolitan, which, if you haven't read it, is one of the finest collections of comics that I've ever read. Likewise, Gravel it's kind of a little hit and miss, but I really like the series. In fact, there's a book called Strange Kiss, which I found to be one of the most shocking small graphic novels that I've ever read. It actually has one of the more disturbing images put in a comic page. Likewise, Fell is very good, and I believe I have Next Wave down there. Next Wave was a pretty awesome Marvel comic at a time when Marvel Comics really did suck pretty hard. Likewise, I used to really like Garth Ennis. I don't like him anywhere near as much now. I think he's really gone downhill in recent years. I hate The Boys. I hate... actually, that's pretty much it. I hate The Boys. But back in the day, I really loved Preacher. Mostly because it was just so wrong. It was awesome. This is not anywhere near as much Rex Mundi as I have. This is about half my comic collection. I really do love Queen and Country and Rex Mundi. If you haven't heard of that, it's kind of a precursor to the Da Vinci Code, and much more well done than that series. Real page-turner, that one. Enemy Ace, probably the most obvious book on the shelf. I just had an interest in that because I wanted to find... if you remember Watchmen, I was really interested in the pirate comic. I can't even see myself, hang on. I was really interested in the pirate comic, and so they were saying in that series that, in a world with legitimate superheroes, they would read comics with a historical perspective. And I was like, that's pretty cool, because I've never really read a comic with a historical perspective. Ironically enough, the only ones I really read were Garth Ennis's, I believe, War Stories, which was a pretty well-done series about World War II, Vietnam, things like that. And so I picked up Enemy Ace, thinking that it was a more historical perspective, and it is. It's pretty good. I like it. So I actually did have an interest in. There's really not that many good pirate comic books out nowadays. There's a lot more than there used to be, but they're kind of more TNA oriented. I forget which one. There's one where this woman wears like a skull and crossbones bra, and I was like, really? I didn't like Sea of Red, which is kind of Tales of the Black Freighter-ish thing where it's vampires or zombies or something like that. Didn't really dig that one. I tried reading that for a few issues and dropped it. Didn't like it. If you know of any other historical type, like war stories, pirates, things like that, I'd be interested in hearing about that, because I do have a little bit of interest in hearing comics that aren't necessarily superhero related. That's kind of fascinating to me. It's something I hadn't really touched on, and that's why I kind of like Queen and Country, because it's more of a secret agent type thing, but more kind of grounded in reality. Let's see, what else? Oh, Hitman. I really liked Hitman. That's one comic book series that was never really fully collected in trade paperbacks, which I thought was kind of lame. I think they only collect really the first 2 or 3 sets. Another one of my favorites, going back to Warren Ellis, is Global Frequency, which was actually made into a TV pilot, which I liked a lot, but was dropped shortly thereafter because of piracy issues. And speaking of, you can probably still find it pirated on the internet. Runaways, I really liked Runaways up until about the 3rd trade paperback, in which case it started seeming very samey, started really repeating itself over and over, and I didn't... Maybe it's still pretty consistently good, I don't know. I thought the artwork kind of fluctuated in quality quite a lot, and I just kind of got bored with it. But for the first 3 trade paperbacks, I was really interested. In fact, I thought it was the best comic going for a long time in Marvel Comics. Let's see, down here. Mostly I've collected the J. Michael Straczynski collection of The Amazing Spider-Man, which a lot of people didn't like. I liked it a lot, especially when it came to the other. I'll admit the Bone Spurs were lame, but J. Michael Straczynski did a very good job with that series, and did things with it that were kind of daring, that didn't ruin the character necessarily. Like he's been ruined now, but I could go on about that forever. I also have a lot of Starman, which I actually have not read much of the Starman. These were a gift from a friend of mine, and Starman's pretty good. Again, this is another one where the trades aren't numbered, and I need to find out which one comes first. Let's see. Likewise, I liked Straczynski's run on Thor. That's my board game of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Thor was very good. Anyway. Oh, I should talk about Phonogram. Phonogram is one of those comics that is almost universally loved by almost everyone. Hang on a second. Phonogram is one of those prototypical comics that everyone else loves, and I hate it. I hate it so much. It's unbelievable. I consider myself kind of a music fan, or at least I did before I read Phonogram. And what it's about, I won't spoil anything for you, and it's kind of one of those things you need to find out on your own. If it sounds like it appeals to you, it probably does. What I will tell you is, this comic is so full of like Britpop references, musical references, and I'm not talking just like it mentions band names or it mentions lead singers or songs. I mean, it mentions individual lyrics and song titles of the most obscure news, songs, bands, artists related to British pop music in the 80s, of which I actually thought I was pretty well up on. Like, I like a lot of those bands, like Bowie, Queen, all that kind of stuff. And I knew nothing. I was so lost when it came to reading this graphic novel. It was just way over my head. They were making references. Like, every line in this comic is essentially a reference to something else. And maybe if you're not into video games or movies, you have a similar feel when watching my reviews. Like, I'm making references all the time, comics, movies, video games, things like that. If you're not in the know, you will not find me funny in the least. You'll just be like, what is this guy talking about? He's making references and shit that make no sense. No sense! And that's the same way with Phonogram. Like, he's just rattling off factoid after factoid, song title, band references, character suicides, and things like that. And he very helpfully includes like a glossary that explains, like page by page, every reference he's making. But it was really frustrating. I mean, you can tell me what the reference is in relation to, but that doesn't help me understand it any better. And so I was like every page flipping back to find out what the fuck this guy was talking about. And I never ever knew. And so it was just way over my head. It was much, much smarter at these things than I was. And so when I finished Phonogram, I was offended. I was just smoked when it came to that book. It was not intended for me. And it clearly wasn't, because I hated every single page of that comic. That was not a comic. That was a record store clerk tying you down and jerking off in your face. And I'm sorry, everyone else in the world loved that book, but me. And so, if you're a music snob, you'll be like, this comic is so deep, it understands music on a level that nobody else ever will, and you know what, I never will. And if understanding music is that pretentious and snobbish, I never want to. So, I'll probably do a sequel to this one where I do want to talk about one more comic that is especially cool, and I probably never would have picked these up. And again, this is going back to Warren Ellis. Where is it? Where is it? Oh, yeah. Black Gas. I actually rather liked Black Gas. This is Warren Ellis's take on the zombie type comic books, which is very well done. And I actually, if somebody asked me if I were going to adapt the comic book into a movie one time, which I would do, and that was actually a really good question, because I didn't know. I don't think I could ever adapt a superhero comic, but if I were ever going to adapt a movie, it would if I had the money, the investors, the time and talent to do it, it would probably be Black Gas, which is kind of, you might think it's a little silly because it's probably the simplest tale out there. It's a zombie movie, but if I were going to make a first movie, it would probably be a movie like this, a horror movie with a little bit of humor thrown in there, and it does take the zombie thing into a direction that is pretty unique, and I like that. And if I were going to do that, I would love to adapt a Warren Ellis story, and this is one of the more obscure ones, but I think it's obscure enough that it would make a very good movie, and if I were going to do that, that would be the one. I've also got my Gravel series signed by the artist Mike Wolford, who is very nice, and he's also the guy who designed that very disturbing moment that I mentioned in Strange Kiss. Those comics are a little hard to find. A lot of Warren Ellis' stuff is released through Avatar Press, which, if your comic book store is good, they'll have some of it, but not all of it. Avatar Press stuff is a little hard to find. So, oftentimes you won't be able to find comics like Black Gas. You won't be able to find Dark Blue. Global Frequency is DC, so you'll tend to find that one quite a lot. But most of the Gravel stuff, the old Gravel stuff, you won't find. Transmet you'll find because that's Vertigo. Again, if you've never heard of it, if you've never seen it, I would check out Transmetropolitan. What a great, great series of books. The only downside is, if you're a little bit limited in budget, there's 11 trade paperbacks. And so if you're going to go for that, if you're going to get into that from beginning to end, that's 11 trades. And that's about, you're probably looking at about $150 to $200 to get the whole run. Maybe your library has it, and if so, I would check it out. But that one takes a little bit of investment to get into, and I would check out the first one just to make sure that it interests you. If it's not your deal, and it may easily not be, because Warren Ellis has a very abrasive and strange style at first that you may not like, for the same reason that I really don't like Grant Morrison. Grant Morrison is widely considered to be one of the great geniuses in comics, and I hate everything he does, honestly. And I could get into that for a long time, talking about the stuff I didn't like, namely Final Crisis. But that's just my personal taste, why I don't like the guy. And I'd probably lose a lot of you guys as fans for not liking Grant Morrison, but I just don't. And for the same reason, a lot of people just don't like Warren Ellis, because he tends to be very, I hate to use the word profane, but yeah, he does tend to be kind of profane, a caustic, abrasive, acidic, basically just look up the word acidic in a thesaurus, and you'll find everything that describes Warren Ellis. But I love that. He reminds me of me in a lot of ways, except a lot more insane, a lot more alcoholic, and a lot more miserable. And so you gotta love that. The guy who embraces just being downright bitter and frustrated. Transmetropolitan is about a drug-addled, alcoholic, miserable as fuck journalist who is angered about everything. And I don't know if that reminds you of anyone, but it reminds me of me if I was on a lot more medication. But you can't go wrong with a story about a guy who has a gun that induces diarrhea in anyone who angers him. And so I think that's kind of the personal fantasy of mine, is to find a diarrhea gun, or a bowel disruptor, I think is what it's called. Anyway, I've gone on about this long enough, and again, this is probably not even half of my comics. I'm a big collector of the trades. What can I say? And I wrote a movie review for a comic for quite a long time, so I have about 120 of those comics laying around. That takes up a shelf all on its own. But yeah, I'll come back for the next series. I'll show you some of my other comics. It's fun talking about them. I love talking comics. I love bitching about comics, especially Spider-Man. A lot of people asked if I was ever going to do another kind of a top the fourth wall with Linkara, and probably not, because I love comics and stuff like that, but he has a much better grasp of the depth and complexity of comics. I'm probably, despite all my collection, I'm probably a much more casual reader of comics. I only followed one, maybe two series. Like, really the only mainstream hero I ever followed was Spider-Man. And so that's why most of my comics anger is related to Spider-Man, because I followed him from early on as a kid up to now. So I know a ton about Spider-Man. I don't know nearly as much about Superman, all those other comics that are kind of major deals, like Justice League. I don't know pretty much anything about Justice League, the major crossovers. I know a little bit of the crossovers, but when it comes to DC crossovers, they serve to frustrate me more than anything, because those really assume that you know a ton about comics, and I don't. About the obscure heroes, things like that. So, when it comes to Atop the Fourth Wall, I think if I was going to bitch about a comic, it would probably be about Spider-Man. And when it comes to Spider-Man being ruined, that's a horse that has been beaten beyond recognition. And I'd hate to be just another guy going like, Spider-Man sucks now, that nobody understands him. Because it's kind of common knowledge that nobody gets Spider-Man right now. And he's been repeatedly ruined over the years. See, there I go again. I could just go on endlessly about how much I hate Spider-Man and everyone who writes him. Like these. Anyway, that's my comics. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back later. Bye.